The PLM UX extensions that run on top of Fusion Managed's REST API provide easy-to-use user interfaces for all stakeholders along the product lifecycle. These applications that are pre-configured make information accessible to anyone at any time in very easy-to-use interfaces. With these applications, customers benefit of a reduced adoption time, increased user efficiency, and user acceptance. They also provide new features like KPI analysis and reviews, and they always make use of the interactive viewer to highlight key information and really make product data accessible to even non-engineering users. They also provide specific services like the service portal that is shown in here, for example, that allows users to access spare part information within PLM to finally submit spare part requests. And also there are specific administration utilities that reduce the administration efforts and implementation costs. Now, the challenge of these solutions is that they require additional setup because they are all provided by a single web server, a single environment that has to be hosted by all of the customers themselves because this is not an out-of-the-box solution. Now, with this video today, I want to show you how easy it is to operate these solutions if you make use of a cloud hosting provider like Google Cloud PCs or Azure or AWS. By using these platforms, you do not need to worry about accessibility from outside, you do not need to worry about HTTPS and so on. So let's have a look at the setup, and actually we will start where we would also start if we would deploy this locally. First, we need to create an application by using the Autodesk Platform Services. Please note that we need to have a specific type that is for desktop, mobile and single pages apps, and we just name the application. And with this application, we actually will be able to grant access to the APIs within our Fusion tenant later on, which requires to whitelist this client ID of this application. And that's what we do in the next step. So we just go into the general settings, go to administration, and in here we just whitelist this client ID. And with this, we provide access to the REST API from outside applications. And this step also is required if you run it locally. And obviously this doesn't take a long time. Now, usually next step would be to download the code from the given GitHub repository and then to run it locally by installing Node.js and so on. So you would go to github.com, go to the PLM extensions and then download the zip file. And this is where we now will have a much easier setup because we will make use of the cloud computing services. In order to do so, as we have a specific settings file that might be required for you, and you're not going to download this file any longer, instead we will directly use the GitHub repository with all of these files, including the settings file. Because of this, you will first of all have to fork this environment. So with a fork, you actually create a copy of this environment. You will still be able to benefit from all of the updates, but within this fork, you will be able to maintain the settings to adjust to your environment. And now comes the exciting part, because you will see that within the next 5 minutes, we will be able to get the software up and running. It's very easy when using the Google Cloud Computing Services, and it's similar at AWS and Azure, which are also other cloud platforms that you can use. Now, keep in mind that when you use Google Cloud Platform Services, there will be charges for the services depending on your setup and the server. And obviously, you need to have a Google account first before you set it up. But as we can see here, the first step that we would do is to create a project inside of this platform, which can have any name. It doesn't matter. No one will see this later on. This is just for your reference. And then within this project, we will create the service to host the application. So once we created a project, please note that you would probably first of all have to define a billing address, which I did here already. And there will be some charges for you, as we will see at the end of this video. But don't worry, there's a free trial period and you can also track the cost and you can also define some cost limits later on. Now, first thing is to create our repo. So we want to connect the server to our GitHub repository, and we simply select it from the GitHub repositories that we have access to. In this case, I was connected to my repository already, so Google is aware of my GitHub account and it can directly allow me to select from my existing repositories and then simply download all the files in order to launch the server that is based on the Node.js code. Please note that Google will automatically redeploy the application for you. So if there are ever any changes to the software, to the code, you will benefit from the automatic deployment process and always have the latest code at hand. Now in the configuration, we can also select the region in which we want to host the environment. And please note that this option drives the cost and charges from Google against the services. Now here at this time, we already have our URL that will be used to host this environment. And this is key to be added into our APS application as a callback URL. So we simply copy paste this URL, paste it as an additional callback URL, and append the suffix callback. Please do so as well, because this will be required to make the server work in the end. Now let's go back to the setup of Google Cloud Services, and you can see here that we can also grant access to this application for anyone so that we can easily access it anywhere at any time. Now, before launching the server, we also need to provide some specific settings that are required by the server. These are settings that you can usually define in your settings.js file, but you can also define them by using environment variables. And I will just add the 3 ones that really matter here at this point in time. The first one is the redirect URI, which is basically the callback URL that we also just added to our APS application before. So just copy paste the link, and please keep in mind to append the callback at the end as well. Now, next variable is the tenant name, which is obviously the one that we have within the URL of our tenant. We just copy paste it without this autodeskplm.com domain. And then finally, we copy paste the client ID also here as a variable. Now, obviously, you can change the settings later on. If there's ever a change to your client ID, don't worry, you can always change this at the end. Once you click on create, Google will automatically now deploy the software for you. So it will automatically download the code, it will launch the software, and you see we don't need to worry about any Node.js at our setup. We do not need to download any libraries. We do not need to worry about HTTPS links and so on. It's very easy and straightforward. And Google will also create a trigger on your GitHub repository. That's also why you need to have a specific fork of this environment, because there will be a trigger which will automatically notify Google if there are any changes to your code to automatically redeploy the server. So the server will not only be up and running all the time for you, thanks to Google, but it will always be based on the latest code. Now, based on my experience, I would recommend you to bookmark the URL of this project. It's still deploying, but you might want to go back to this project quite often. Therefore, please bookmark this link if you want to. And also later on, if you ever would like to change some project settings, for example, delete the project, you can always go in here, go to the project settings, and you can see here there's a shutdown button that allows you to shut down this instance later on if you want to. There's also a manage billing link in here that would allow you, for example, to define a maximum limit to make sure that this doesn't exceed a specific cost that you defined yourself. But with that, it's all done. You can see now we have a link, we have a URL. We simply click this URL, and with this, the UX services are accessible to us. So we can directly browse the documentation and also directly use the predefined applications also from in here. And now it's all hosted on Google Cloud. So I think this is very easy to set up. You don't need to have a specific system, no software to maintain, no licenses, nothing. It's simply there, and anyone can now take benefit of these extensions. So this is pretty straightforward, and the whole process takes less than 10 minutes. Now, to close this video, I just want to show you some additional features also in regards to billing, because there is some cost in here, as I mentioned a couple of times. You can see here, you can easily track the costs of your instance here at Google if you want to. And within Manage Billing account, we'll then also be able to define threshold limits and automatic notifications. With that, thank you very much. See you next time.